Hello, my name is Jonathan Palfrey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe as always, as it massively helps me out. Now here's another quick fire video, another quick look at something which I don't actually have in front of me. Sorry, I'm going to keep doing these, but just that's the way the news is moving. This, announced a few days ago, is apparently the new Mavic 3 Pro. Whether it really is it, or it's just a dodgy sketch that someone decided to do and share with the internet and create a load of buzz that shouldn't really exist, maybe that's the case. However, it is intriguing, some of the specs, and I think it's worth having a look at, and whether it's maybe a consideration as a future upgrade. Now, of course, with all leaks, and I'm not even sure if this counts as a leak, as it's kind of sketches, you have to kind of take it with a pinch of salt. It could just be someone coming up with their dream spec of what they'd like a drone to be. And there are certain things in this which, you know, make it questionable whether it really is going to be the specs of this new drone. But there's also some interesting ideas that could completely change the way the Mavic Pro line is actually seen. And I think actually that's where maybe there's a hint of truth in this. I think maybe this could be actually maybe the Inspire replacement. I think before we go into any further of actually what the features here on this drone, let's look back at the Mavic 2, which I've got right here actually. I think the Mavic 2 Pro is clearly a legend when it comes to camera equipment. It just stood out compared to all the competition. I've used it so much, it's such great value for money. The incredible shots you get from it, all in a small package that's easy to travel with a great camera sensor, great image quality, a great gimbal, and, you know, what's quite crazy, an incredible price. And I think that's where DJI went wrong with this camera. Now, of course, I did a video recently talking about the best drone of 2021, and I was saying how I still think it is the Mavic 2 Pro. If you haven't seen that video, click in the link above, where I talk about whether the Air 2S is a good replacement, or you should stick with this camera, or you should be waiting for the new Mavic 3. And the biggest problem I think DJI have with their drone lineup is effectively they had no competition with anyone else, yet they kept releasing better and better drones. They kept kind of beating themselves, which is very, very impressive. And the rate of innovation has been absolutely incredible. When you think only a few years ago we had like the Phantom 1 and the Phantom 2 where you had to stick your own GoPro on the bottom with no gimbal or anything like that. And we've advanced in a very short space of time into something that can do incredible 4K footage in a tiny package. The Air 2S is proof of that and is probably more than good enough for 90% of productions that exist. So where does that leave the Pro line? Well, I think when they produced this Pro, and it was only $1.5 grand, that was too cheap. They probably should have charged more for it. However, they knew they couldn't charge as much as their Inspire, which still was also quite affordable in the sort of £3,000 to £4,000 price range. That has left them in sort of this black hole though, of where do they place a future drone? How do they upgrade, or how do they get you to pay more? Because actually, do you need more and better compared to what the Mavic 2 Pro can offer? And that's where I think the Mavic 3 Pro comes in, and these rumored specs might actually be true. And I think they need to do something with a price rise to match that really separates the Mavic 3 Pro from all their other drones. And maybe that's where these specs come in. Now, having a look at the specs and the images, the first most obvious thing is this unusual gimbal camera setup on the front. Apparently it's going to have two cameras, or at least two lenses, and it's going to have a 7x zoom on the smaller sensor or the smaller lens, and then a wide angle 24mm lens on the larger one. Whether there'll be two sensors or something a great YouTube channel I discovered called Creator's Cup talked about and actually made a 3D model describing how it could work, maybe a mirror so the same sensor can be used for both lenses. That would be very, very interesting and a clever innovation by DJI. Either way, that does open up some really interesting options, basically combining the zoom and the Pro line into this one ultimate camera. It gets around the problem about interchangeable lenses as well, which maybe is more difficult to achieve than having a dual lens setup. And as crazy dual lens sounds, it's not really that mad. We're used to it on phones. I mean, camera technology has obviously got cheap enough now that we can include multiple lenses and multiple sensors in phones, and it all fits no problem, and the quality is quite incredible. So the idea of actually fitting it on a dedicated video device like a drone isn't really that crazy, and perhaps something that we should have expected sooner. Now apparently the gimbal will have a locking mechanism built into it, so rather than having to use this slightly dodgy bit of plastic that never quite fits on properly when you're trying to attach it in a rush or trying to take it off in a rush, apparently it's going to have its own sort of locking mechanism so it keeps it in place during transport. That makes a lot of sense actually, and I think that's a very kind of expected upgrade you'd see from this drone. There is talks as well of a 40-minute flight time, which would be very impressive. And once again, I could see how that is the natural progression of where DJI drones are going, and certainly a way of separating this more professional drone from their more consumer line. Whether you need 40 minutes is a whole other question. I mean, I think that is kind of a ridiculous length of time. I find 20 minutes more than enough for most shoots, but 40 minutes really does open up the opportunity to just then maybe only use one battery for a couple of flights, rather than having to change your battery after every flight. So hopefully that means, you know, a couple of batteries could get you through nearly all day of drone flying, versus perhaps in the past where you have to bring 3 or 4 just in case you needed a bit more during the day's shoot. There is also talk of a 16mm wide angle adapter, and you know what, that actually makes a lot of sense. I could see how that attached on the front of the drone, it could automatically rebalance the gimbal, and that would be a very simple way of giving you more lens options on a fixed lens drone. Now, some of the slightly more crazy specs, if 2 cameras wasn't enough, is apparently it will include a 1 terabyte of internal storage. Now, that does seem a bit crazy, considering the Mavic 2 had only 8 gigabytes, and now going up to 1 terabyte, that's a massive jump. Why would there be such a large jump? I'm unsure whether that really is true, or whether it means that it's compatible with 1 terabyte micro SD cards, which I think is probably a lot more realistic. The only thing that could make that true is the rumor of including ProRes. The thing is though, we know ProRes has a licensing fee, we know it costs more money to include it on devices, so that would have to be factored into the cost somewhere of the drone. However, that said, cameras like the Blackmagics do include ProRes built into them, and they're affordable cameras. So it's not impossible to imagine that ProRes could get featured on a drone like this. I mean, the quality would be incredible if that was the case. You know, a big upgrade from using MP4s. It's probably going to be using the same 5.7K sensor, or sensors, I guess it may be, from the Air 2S, and that makes a lot of sense. You know, reuse that same sensor, however, with a higher quality of ProRes recording will really maximize what you can get out of it. So are these rumors true? Is this something we can really expect from the Mavic 3? Well, it's not impossible. I wouldn't be surprised if there was this radical change of the Pro line. As I mentioned, I think they priced the Mavic 2 Pro too cheaply, really. I think for the quality you're getting and the features you're getting, they could have easily charged well over $2,000 for the camera. They didn't, because I guess they wanted to still keep it more within the sort of consumer and prosumer lines versus the Inspire, which is clearly the professional line. And they had the Phantom as well at the time, which was sort of in between as well. So there's a lot of confusion about which line would you go for as a professional. However, what's actually happened is everyone's gone for the Mavic 2 Pros, and it's being used on plenty of professional shoots because it's more than good enough, and that compact size makes it so much more useful than Inspire 2. I think people want some of the features that the Inspire 2 offers though, like the longer flight times, like the ProRes, and things like the different lens options or zoom options available that you normally have with the interchangeable mount, but having that built into a much smaller package. And I think that's where maybe this drone is going, and why these rumors might be real. Yes, I think it could actually have a 1 terabyte storage. Yes, I think it could have ProRes recording, and yes, I think it could have 2 lenses on the front of the gimbal. Now, that absolutely all sounds incredible, but I think it does come with a caveat, and that is going to be the price. Without doubt, I think this camera is going to be well above $2,000. I think you would struggle to see this camera anywhere near the price range of the Air 2S or the Mavic 2 Pro where it currently sits. I think the Air 2S is effectively going to become the Mavic 2 replacement, which it sort of has, minus the aperture control. I think that's the market for the prosumers, whereas this is going to be very much a professional drone with a, unfortunately, professional price tag. Now, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Is this a drone you're excited to buy? Do you think these specs are going to be real? And is it worth it? Do you think actually we need all these extra features? As I mentioned in the previous video talking about the Red V Raptor, you know, they've got these new features in there. They've got 8K 120 and everything like that. But do we need all of that? Do we need all of that considering the amount of extra money we have to spend on it? And it's the same with this drone. Do we need 7x zoom? How often do you really need that extreme parallax effect? You know, do we need ProRes and 40-minute flight times and 1 terabyte of storage? You know, these are incredible features, but actually the quality of the Mavic 2 Pro is still incredibly good. The quality of the Air 2S is incredibly good. And actually, have we hit that plateau where people just don't need the next biggest and greatest camera or drone that comes out? I'd love to hear your opinions on it. And as always, thank you very much for watching my videos. Please like and subscribe because it massively helps out. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.